Okay. History of the Heartland is a great privilege of meeting with Pat McDaniel this evening. And Pat, you're a native of Decatur. You've been involved with many arenas of community service in Decatur. You're a city councilman, you're involved with local politics, and you're also a Vietnam veteran. So we have a lot of things we'll touch on tonight.
Right. I guess we all play different roles in our lives, and so I've had quite a few roles in my life and proud of them, and I can't believe that I'm still playing a key role in our community.
Well, it's an honor. But before we get into all those different aspects, let's kind of go back to the beginning, if you wouldn't mind, and just kind of set the scene of what it was like growing up in Decatur. What was your family life and that?
Well, again, I was born in 1948. It was like September the 11th, 1948, and my parents brought me home from the old St. Mary's Hospital to the third floor above Rob's Shoe Store. That was my first home, and Central Park was my first playground. And then, of course, they divorced early in my life, so single mom raising, and I lived in 9 different inner city neighborhoods as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, by the time I was in junior high school, because my mother would rent a house, and of course this is the 50s, and there was a shortage of homes, so the owners would say we're selling it or we're moving in. And so I always remember Mom would hire a rental truck, and when the last piece of furniture was loaded, we didn't have a car, so we'd call a cab. So I went to 5 different grade schools, and then I went to junior high school, Roosevelt, and then I went to old Stephen Decatur High School and graduated in 1967. And these were all inner city neighborhoods in that. So as we approach, the council approaches neighborhood revitalization, I've been there, done that, and it's sad. That's what's happened to our neighborhoods, like many other cities. So that's a issue we're going to be tackling over the next few years, and that. So, but it was good to grow up. I always say it was good to grow up and to leave it to Beaver days.
Yeah.
A kid could be a kid.
Yeah.
You could say, "Hey, Mom, I'm going out to play or ride my bike," and we were safe. You wanted water, you'd go up to the neighbor's hose and get a drink of water and that. So it was a good time of life to grow up. I always.
What was like a typical day like?
Well, again, of course, I had babysitters because Mom worked and that. And so, you just go out and play with the neighborhood kids, ride your bike. I had a Schwinn bike with a horn on the side, and we would play kick the can and that type. And really didn't, even though I lived near some parks, babysitter didn't want you going to the park, because she would have to go, and they're usually young girls that were watching. Of course, sometimes we didn't have a TV till I was in 3rd grade. That time. So it was again, my friends' parents were like second families. They had cars, they'd take us places and things like that. So, but it was, we never knew we were poor. A lot of people never know they're poor. You just, the other family has a car or they get to go on vacations and that. So, my mother struggled, sometimes two jobs and that. And it was, we made it through. We made it through. And matter of fact, today my mother will be 95 years old in August. Still, she's the last of all her brothers and sisters. My brother died about 11 years ago, so she's a strong person, and hopefully, I think my dad is still alive. He'll be 94, so I've got some good genes. As long as I have the Social Security checks coming in and my health, I'll be just fine.
Very good.
But it was a good time to grow up in Decatur.
Was there any neighborhood in particular that sticks in your mind?
Oh, we lived all over, like I said, 9 different neighborhoods. My first job was at A&P on Main Street, and we lived right across the street. So that's where I probably lived the longest of any the places we lived. And so that was my first job, and it was kind of funny. There was no back door to the apartment. So if the manager needed me to come because somebody didn't come, he could look out of his office and look over. So I couldn't sneak out of the house. Pat, you're there. Come on over. We need you. And that. So again, I've worked since I was 16 years old in that, and it just laid the foundation to help me as I went into different careers in school.
Was that common for you in your neighborhood that the kids would go to work at 16
Well,
and have a part-time job?
Well, even back in the old days. I mean,
Yeah.
my mother retired at 62, and they said, well, you're going to get a cut in the Social Security. She said, I've been working since I was 14. I'm tired.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, people work. I don't think any of my friends, maybe it wasn't typical. None of my friends, one friend had a paper route, but I don't remember any of my close friends having jobs. I did it. It kind of helped support, help my mom.
Sure.
I'd buy my own clothes and stuff like that. Yeah. So, but it was a good experience and a good learning experience.
What do you remember about your time at Stephen Decatur High School?
Oh, it was great. Again, it was good. You had some great teachers. It was a great facility. I wasn't as involved in school activities as I was in my church. I went to Grace Methodist Church starting at junior high school. So I was more involved with the youth program there than I was in the school. Plus I worked, So, it was a good period to grow up. But, I always remember watching what was happening on TV in Vietnam and think, wow, and then a couple years later, I'm over there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But
when you graduated in 67,
yeah.
So really, just as the Vietnam War was maybe not quite at its peak, but
yeah. I think when I was over there, it was at its peak,
when you got there,
because it ended in 74, 75, and I was over there in 1970, and that. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your Vietnam experience, if that's okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The downtown has always been so many things. Of course, we didn't have the mall and things like that, but the downtown area, to me, my life has been around. Of course, my first home was in downtown Decatur. Went to Stephen Decatur High School, graduated downtown. Of course, my doctors and everything was centered downtown. You dressed up. We take the bus downtown, and we had to dress up. You didn't go down in shorts and t-shirts and flip-flops and that. And then, matter of fact, where the old what was the cafe there on North Street, Wayside Inn, that became the recruiting station, and that's where I got, I signed up to be in the Army, and when I came back, I went back to Richland Community College, which was in the old Milliken Bank, and now, like I said, now I'm on the city council, so right where the Stephen Decatur stood, I worked downtown at a small retailer for about 4 years, and so the downtown was really a major part of my life, and it still is.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I just, you think back, wow, everything that happened to me really, and my first date, junior high school, I paid for cab fare for this gal in junior high school, and we met. She came down to the Avon, and I remember going to Woolworths and buying her a necklace. So that was my first date. I paid for the cab fare for her to get down there.
Now, the transfer house must have moved to Central Park when you were very young.
It was 62.
Oh, 62.
It was
okay,
62.
So you were
So we
grown.
It was always funny when we'd go downtown. My mom would say, "Hold on my hand," and we're going to run because the cars would go around, so you ran, and she would never allow my brother and I to go inside. We had to stay outside, even in the winter, because she didn't want us to go inside and that. So, but yeah, it was the transfer house was important. As a matter of fact, that's how I got into politics.
Really?
Back in the 2000, 2001, I found out from one of the city staff, the meter, traffic, parking and everything, meter people. They're going to get rid of the transfer house as the official logo of the Decatur. And I said, over my dead body. So I started a campaign with posters and different save the transfer house, because they were going to change it to an agricultural thing. And at that time, I was thinking about running for mayor, and I started going to all the council meetings on a regular basis. So come to find out, it had never been. I wrote letters to the editor, and other people did too, to save. And come to find out, it had never officially been adopted as the official logo of Decatur.
Oh.
So the council, I remember Mayor Howley was the mayor, and he said, well, this is a no-brainer. Pat is works, so they officially adopted it as the
Wow.
And so that kind of got me started in politics. And people said, well, why don't you run? And I ran for mayor and lost. Of course, that was my first try in that. So that's the transfer house is my baby, and just like Paul Osborne was the fountain. That was his baby at the same time.
Sure.
You get the new fountain built. Mine was to save the transfer house.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So you're graduating from high school, Stephen Decatur.
Yeah. I went over to Illinois State University for 1 year.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And then, I decided, so I ended up being, of course, this is right at Vietnam. So I decided to enlist. I enlisted for 3 years in the U.S. Army. And I went into image interpretation, military intelligence. That was a division. And so got recruited, and sworn in down in St. Louis. Went to Fort Leonard Wood, and for basic training. Then I went out to Fort Holabird. That was the military joint military branch intelligence school. That was near Baltimore. And come to find out, they didn't test my eyes to see if I could see stereo. Because in image interpretation, that planes would take photos, and then you look through stereo. Well, I couldn't see stereo.
Oh.
So then I moved over into military intelligence, or in the POW, prisoner of war and interrogator.
Oh, I see.
And document interpretation and that. So that's what I ended up doing.
Okay. So how long were you in school then before?
Well, I was in Fort Holabird for about 6 months, and then they sent me out to the Presidio Monterey Language School, where I learned Hungarian.
Okay.
But you know how the Army and the branches, okay, how many of you can type? You raise your hand, okay, you're a truck driver. That's how military work. So then after that I was in Fort Meade, Maryland, and then the orders came down with 10 people on it for Vietnam. When it was cut 2 weeks later, there was only one person on there. That was me.
Okay.
So I, of course, went out to Oakland, pre-Vietnam, and then the longest flight of my life was from going to Vietnam. We flew from Oakland to Hawaii, from Hawaii to Guam to the Philippines, and into near Saigon. So everybody was dressed in green, and it was quite a journey, and the year in Vietnam was quite an experience.
So you arrived in Saigon. Were you did you know that you were headed toward the 101st Airborne?
No. And they send you to another training camp to get you acclimated in that, and then they assign you different divisions. Okay. So they assigned me to the 101st Airborne. I was in the division base camp with the military intelligence unit attached to the 101st. So I would do interrogations of prisoners of war, whether it was North Vietnamese or Viet Cong. I do it in hospitals. I do it in prisoner of war camps and that. They'd fly me out. If they caught somebody in a brigade level, they'd fly me out in a small helicopter with an interpreter. Never met any Americans where I was that spoke Vietnamese. We always had interpreters in that. And so and then, of course, when documents, they'd capture somebody with documents, maps and different things, letters. Of course, you can get a lot of military intelligence out of that. So it could be 2 o'clock in the morning, and say, come on down, we've got a trove of documents and maps. We need to interpret them. So sitting down with our interpreters, and we'd go through it, and I'd write reports for the Chief of Staff of the General of the 101st Airborne. So that was, I did not have it as bad as the soldiers out in the field. That was tough. Tough time. And matter of fact, I lost one of my friends from junior high school, Alan Ashenfelter, was in the Marines, and he was killed over in Vietnam in that. So, but it was an experience. I remember, you look at the tough times, and then you had to laugh over. You had to, when any situation, you have to laugh once in a while, or you won't make it through. I remember an inspection was supposed to be made by the general staff. We failed because we didn't rake the rocks in a right way to make it pretty. I said, "You're kidding, all of us." So we had to rake the rocks, and they came back, and yeah. So that's the Army in that. So you just kind of laugh at those things. We got hit by the enemy. Usually about maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night, we'd be hit by mortars. Okay, and you can just.
You were in Hawaii City, or?
Well, I would go into the former Capitol Way to do interrogations.
Okay.
Of prisoners and that. So
your headquarters was outside of the city.
Well, we were in a division base camp, 101st Division base camp, but a lot of times central. South Vietnamese headquarters was in Hue, so they would capture, and then we'd find out, and then they'd send me in, and maybe some other interrogators to interrogate prisoners in that. But we went anywhere that we could interrogate. Yeah.
So the enemy knew where you were, and able to get close enough to send some mortars.
They'd mortars, and then you could count about 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd hit us with rockets.
Okay.
Now, of course, when you're green and never fought a war, you were, scared shitless, okay? Mm-hmm. But as we always said they couldn't hit the side of a barn. And so towards the end, you grab everything, lights go out, and then you have to go out in the foxholes and stuff like that. So it was just part of the fighting a war and that. So the only time I was injured is we ate on paper plates at the mess hall, and they used jet gas to light the fire. Well, I didn't know jet gas had been thrown in, and I lit a match and right up my arm. But that's the only injury I had, other than having major sinus headaches all the time because of the humidity and stuff. So,
did you feel like you were prepared for? Did the training prepare you for?
Well, I don't think. Yeah, well, yes, to a certain extent, but nobody's prepared for war. Yeah. Nobody's prepared for war, and so I always encourage. I think all young people, men and women, both need to go in for at least a year or two. You learn more about yourself, you get in shape, and you learn some skills that you can use. And I almost stayed in the service because I was in a good field, and I enjoyed it, and I was a spit and polish type soldier. Even when I came back from Vietnam, I had 8 months left, and I was stationed down in godforsaken Fort Hood, Texas. Tumbleweed in that, and we'd have to in the morning, line up for inspection, and all my clothes were always pressed and fatigues and shoes spit shine because you had to do something because there was no work for us. And that. So after the assembly in the morning, everybody scattered, went to the library or did whatever they could. I ended up to keep busy for 8 months. I became the postal officer for our company in that. I had to take tests and that, so that kept me busy. And then I came back to Decatur.
Well, that was quite an experience there that you had at the peak of the Vietnam War.
Oh yeah, it was. Again, I was extremely lucky that we had hardships, but nothing like the foot soldiers out in the field.
Did you ever meet or come across Don Jack, a former Decatur police officer? He had also been in intelligence.
Yeah, no.
But he would have been in the other side that you described, the
image. Image interpretation. Yeah,
side,
no,
okay.
No.
So you came back to Decatur,
right.
And you're coming out of the Army. War's still going on, but your tour's done.
Yeah.
How did you think about your reentry, and what was it like?
Well, it was again. You've heard stories that we weren't treated well. We didn't have the brass bands meet us, and because of course we were hearing what was happening over in the United States with all the marches against the war and this and that. So, unfortunately, we Vietnam veterans weren't welcomed home. Our family welcomed us and friends and things like that. So, that kind of hurt and that. And I know when I've talked to many Vietnam veterans, we appreciate anybody that's been in the service, past and present. But, when the country didn't welcome us back, and then you had the Desert Storm and that, and all the welcome back with parades and that, we were kind of hurt because we, fought a long war. I mean, and so that kind of bothered us, and it still does to a certain extent. And and also on the subject of heroes, I think everybody's hero. It has been so overused, and we, again, I've talked to veterans. We never thought of us as heroes. We did our job. We were trained to do, whether we were drafted or we enlisted. And so we knew there were heroes. We had, but now everybody's a hero, and that just, and it's diluted. When everyone's a hero, it's kind of diluted. It doesn't mean anything to a certain extent, and that. So, but again, we never thought of us as heroes, but we had friends that lost their lives. They were heroes in that. So, but again, here the last 15 years, we've felt more welcome back. They've had parades for us and that. So I think the country felt guilty that they didn't welcome us back. It was just a political time going on, and war is hell, but also it can be war hell when you come back and you're not treated well in that. So, but you move on with your life, and that's what everybody I've known in Vietnam. We moved on with their lives, family, and went back to school. Richland Community College was, of course, it wasn't here. It didn't start till 1972. We were one of the last major areas to have in Illinois to have a community college. And so that was a godsend. Matter of fact, I'm going to be addressing, I've been invited Tuesday out at Richland. They're opening a new Veterans Center. And so they asked me, not only as a Vietnam veteran, but I'm alumni of the school and a donor of the school, so I'm going to say a few words. And
I'll see you there.
So again, the Richland Community College had an important impact on veterans that returned to this area.
Well, talk a little bit about that. So you came back. It's now what, 1971?
Well, I got out in 71, and then I started back to Richland in 72.
Okay.
73, maybe it was 73.
Okay.
Yeah, and that. So again, I worked. I was with A&P, so I worked full time and went to school, which a lot of the other Vietnam veterans and other military veterans did.
Was that the same A&P that you'd worked?
No, I'd been at several in Central Illinois and things like that.
Gotcha.
So again, I had good management experience, so I built on and got business degrees. I got 3 degrees from Richland, then went over to what was called Sangamon State, and I switched to political science, which I always remember Larry. What Klugman always said, Pat, you're not going to like that, and I didn't, because business, you accomplish something at the end, and in political science, you never did that. So, but again, it was. I'm glad Richland was here because it had a major impact on everybody's lives, especially mine.
What was it like then at Richland so you were there when it was brand new?
Oh, brand new. Yeah. Well, it was in the old. Yeah, it was just started. In their first headquarters was in the old Milliken Bank building, which was kind of unique. Of course, downtown. Like I said, it's I just you went to night school and did your studies and this and that, and so you met other veterans and other young people. Sometimes. I might be the oldest person in the class. I went back to Richland when their present site, how many years ago, take a computer class. Well, I looked around and I was the oldest probably by 30 years. And they were always coming to me, I said, hey, that's why I'm coming to the computer class. You guys are young. You've grown up with this stuff.
Yeah.
So, but again, you learn from everybody.
Yeah.
That's what I like about community colleges. There's all different age groups and different experiences in that.
And that facilitated your ability to work and
move forward.
School at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and then you were with A&P for some
about
time.
12 years. I started out and then moved into management and stuff like that. And again, retail is in your blood. I've always liked retail and serving people in that. So as I tell young people, every part-time job you have, you're going to learn something, and that you will use later in your careers and your life and that. So, Decatur, I did move away, like I said, when I lived in Des Moines for a while with the company, but Decatur's always had my heart, and so this is where what family I have left lives here, and too bad Decatur is in the state of Illinois. We maybe be a little more progressive in that. So the state of Illinois kind of drags down a lot of communities. So,
yeah. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Iowa, but you did spend a couple of years in Iowa.
No, I was only there about 6 months.
Over 6 months.
Yeah, I was.
What I wanted to ask you about that was, that was, other than Vietnam, that was the first time you'd been away from Decatur, really?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, what did you miss about Decatur?
Well, again, that's your family's here, and
Yeah.
I didn't like the job. I was a sales rep,
Yeah.
driving around in a car, going, and I just decided that wasn't the thing for me.
So then you knew you wanted to come back to Decatur?
Right. And then
And
that's
you-
when I got a job with the Sangamon Greeting Card Company. Started out as a district manager, moved up to divisional vice president before the company closed.
And that was what, in the 1980
That would have been
period?
1978.
Okay,
Something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And that was a good sized reading.
well, yeah, we were the fourth largest. We were a national company.
Yeah.
And so we competed against Hallmark and American Greetings and Gibson greeting cards and that. And but our major accounts were Kmart and Walmart, where we had all greeting cards, gift wrap, other items, stationery, and that. So we were very innovative, small company because we were competing, against Hallmark and American Greetings and the others. So, but it came down to the third. What they always say: the first generation starts it, the second builds it, and the third generation screws it up. But Kmart and Walmart were going after. They wanted more money for rebates and all this,
Yeah.
and so they went to all companies. And so the privately owned company, the owners looked at the costs and everything, and said we just can't compete. So Kmart was our major account, so they gave us a year to get out of their stores, and Hallmark took it over, and they couldn't really afford it either, but they didn't want to lose market share.
Yeah.
So it was a good company and good people in that. So like I said, I was there almost 20 years.
And during that 20 years, you were on the road a lot. You had national responsibility,
Right, yeah.
So you were really all over
I
the country.
traveled average about 46 weeks a year, all traveling, sometimes 2 weeks at a time if I was on either coast, and I lived out of suitcases, you know.
What was your life like? Would you be on the road all week and then come home on the weekend?
I always said I slept around a lot in hotels, but something, it's kind of, just a little thing. You hear about, what Chicago's listed as one of the top cities for bedbug. I stayed in podunk hotels, motels, and 5-star. Never had a bedbug in all those 20 years and that. So you got tired of, eating out all the time and different hotels. I know when I'd come home, my mom would have me over for a good home-cooked meal, and I would get sick because I wasn't used to the rich. So she got kind of paranoid. Well, you get sick every time, because it was rich food.
Yeah.
You could eat at a 5-star hotel, a restaurant, but it's still quote fast food restaurant, that type of thing. So, but again, met a lot of people, a lot of experience, nice people out. A lot of celebrities in the plane sitting next to me or different places and that. So there was some good times, and again, you had a job to do in that. So
you saw a lot of the country, and
I've been out. As far as traveling, I've been over to Europe like 10 or 11 times, London and England probably 10 times, and that. So what vacations I had, I also traveled.
Yeah.
I remember one time I had been out in California for 2 weeks, and I had made to fly over to Amsterdam because I love tulips and I wanted to see, And so I came home, and I was home 2 days and left for Amsterdam. And I'm walking through Amsterdam, thinking, what in the world? I was almost crying. Well, the jet lag from California coming home and that. So I've been to Norway. Visit a student that was a foreign student through our church. similar to AFS, but it was through the church. So we stayed in touch and that, and so she'd been over here with her family and that, and so they invited me over there, and so that was about 10 years ago. So I've been in Norway, been Amsterdam, of course, England and Scotland. Met some two families up in Scotland through a professor at Richland. They were Scottish and that, so I'd visit with them. I was a runner for 26 years, and so one of the families said, hey, he was a professor at a university there in Scotland. Hey, we're going to have a half marathon. Why don't you come over and run? So I flew over from Amsterdam, and so I'm running, and I'd never run a half marathon, and I enjoyed running, but I wasn't, that fast. And so he and his daughter were along the way, kind of guiding, and I was coming in last, and they'd yell, "Don't embarrass us. Everyone knows you're staying with us, and you're coming in last." And so at the end of the race, I said, "Where's my T-shirt?" "Well, we don't only give T-shirts to kids." I said, "Well, in America, we get a T-shirt." So the son, the professor, talked to the president of the university, and the president said, "Bring him back the next day." So they gave me a T-shirt and a sweatshirt from the university to shut me up.
Got a souvenir. So you were living in Decatur throughout that time,
Right?
even though
Yes.
you traveled
Yeah.
the country.
Yeah. Right.
Being in and out, did it make you more aware of changes that were happening in the community?
Well, it did that, and also I saw, which has helped me. You saw what was happening in other communities.
Yeah.
And one thing is, of course, when the mall came, like any city, a lot of the downtown. Our downtown for our size city, and any even larger city, was, everyone said, "Oh, there's nothing downtown and it's going downhill." We had retail, we had banks, we had office buildings, we were really good. I mean, again, I've been in communities that would kill to have a downtown that we had even back then, let alone now.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, because I'd talk to people and see what's going on, and that's kind of helped me in my as a council person. Even though it's been a few years, you remember what was going on, and I try to keep abreast. I'm a great reader. I read. When I was on the road, I'd read the different local newspapers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all that. So and to this day, I read the Wall Street every day. I read our local newspaper. I read about 4 or 5 business magazines, and so to see what's going on.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe we need to do this. I pass along to the mayor and the city managers. Hey, look at this. Here's a company maybe we need to go after, retail. This would be an ideal fit. So I always tell young people, even if you're out of school, continue to learn, because that's going to help you and your company, and you're going to move up in that. So I always try to keep abreast of new trends and things like that. As long as they're not trends, they're going to be just here for a little bit. Everyone jumps on the bandwagon, and you spend all this money and do it, and it's not going to last. So, but it was an experience. I most of the time I enjoyed it, but it was tiring. You lost some friends because if you're only home on weekends and you got to get everything done, and they always wanted to go out and eat, which I didn't, but to have to keep friends. So I did lose some closeness of some friends and things because I was on the road all the time.
Yeah. You got involved with a lot of different organizations, in the community, with the church, with the Grace United Methodist Church. You were an advisory member on the Illinois State Historical Society. You were involved with the Oglesby Mansion. How did that kind of all transpire?
Again, as director of a history museum, you come into contact. I'd go to annual conferences of the Illinois Museum Association, and then other museums around. We kind of worked together.
Yeah.
I was co-chair of the Decatur attraction in this because we wanted tourism, and so I'd use my expertise, and because I probably had more visitors from different states and different parts of Illinois and foreign countries than any of the other museums.
Yeah, let's back up. So you became the executive director of the Macon County Historical Museum.
Yeah.
Was that in 2000?
That would be 2005.
2005.
Yeah, and I was director till for 8.5 years.
And so that that kind of marked a big change from when you were traveling. Now
yes.
suddenly you were.
I was home.
You had a lot of time.
Home. So I had time to get involved in more in the community and in politics.
Yeah.
And I started attending city council meetings in 2000 or 2001. Since then, I've been to every council meeting, either as a private citizen, a reporter for the Decatur Tribune. I covered the council for 8 years, or as a councilman. I've attended every city council meeting but 2 in all those years. So I always tell anybody that's going to run for any type of office, whether it's school board, city council, come to the meetings on a regular basis, so you know. Even you think you may know what's going on till you get on the actual board, but it gives you who the players are, how things are working, and it's always kind of sad. And I always know who's going to start running for council because they start showing up a month before an election, and they know nothing what's going on.
Yeah.
I went my direction. I went to every city commission as many times as I could, and there was quite a few over the years. So I got to know what they did and that. So, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to be elected. And I lost several times in that, but I kept trying.
Yeah.
So I've been on the council now 9 years. I'm in my 9th year. And I've enjoyed it. The one reason I ran it because I want to help my community and help guide it. I'm a very common sense person on finances, and been there, done that. You don't try every new trend if it doesn't make sense. So I know a lot of people said over the years you're the only one that's been on with common sense on the council for a long time. So I take that as a badge of honor. And that.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Fascinates me that you were interested in getting on the council, but you had to kind of persist, right? You didn't just get right on.
No.
How many times did you have to run until you?
Well, I ran for mayor and lost, and I ran 2 more times for council and lost.
Okay.
And then 3rd time's a charm.
Yeah.
And then so I've been, like I said, I've run 3 races because one was a 2-year, then a 4-year, then another 4-year.
So what happened during that time that made the difference between? Pat McDaniel running as a candidate and losing, and then all of a sudden Pat getting on and then continuously staying on? Was it that your community presence was getting more higher up?
I don't know. What again, voters are fickle.
Yeah.
But even if I lost, I continued to. I was active in the what's called CONO, Coalition Neighborhood Organizations. Continued going to meetings. Not only did I go to things that dealt with the city, but I also city council. But I also went to school boards. I went to county because we all work together. So I wanted, I went to a school board meeting.
Yeah.
And went to different events. And that to not only find out what's going on, sit in the back row and hear what people are asking for and that.
Yeah.
And I continue to do that. I know the mayor, Julie Moore, has said Pat has gone to more meetings, and I think even former Mayor Paul Osborne said Pat has gone to more meetings than any council person he's ever known. That's how you learn. You just don't get elected and go to a council meeting twice a month and think that's it.
Yeah.
You've got to be out there finding out what's going on and hearing what people are saying.
Yeah.
And that's what I stress to everybody. Just don't automatically start running and think you've got to get a basis of what's going on in the community.
Sure. So during this period, as you were executive director, also the Maine County Historical Society, you had a lot of contacts with other history-related activities
throughout the state.
The state
and that. And I remember one time we had it was called the Lincoln Festival, and we had a couple country bands. And I kept getting these letters from an organization, and I kept throwing away. Finally, they contacted me. It was from one of those non-profit agencies on music copyrights. And they said, you had a couple of bands, you owe us money. And so we had to, go through some lawyers and that, and we got it straight. But that spread like wildfire. So I started contacting other museums in Illinois and others. Said, because these, again, artists create the music, and then they hire these, a couple of these not-for-profit organizations to protect the copyrights. And so there were a lot of other museums and organizations doing things and playing music that's copyrighted. Even Happy Birthday is copyrighted. And I know the Children's Museum was using Happy Birthday when they tell the kids they'd play Happy Birthday in the bathrooms when it was over, then your hands were clean. Well, they had to quit doing that.
Oh my God.
So there was, matter of fact, even in Springfield, the Sangamon, well, it was at University of Illinois, they were playing music that was copyrighted, and they had to stop doing that. So a lot of even out-of-state museums, the word got out, and they were contacting me. And so there was a lot of learning and learning from each other, especially at different conferences and things like that.
Can you talk a little bit about your involvement with the community, with the neighborhood association?
Right. Well, I live in the West End, lived there now 36 years, and I was a lot of different neighborhood groups around the city come and go over the years. And I was president of the West End Neighborhood Organization for 2 years. We'd have monthly meetings, bring in guest speakers, talk about concerns of the neighborhood, have neighborhood cleanups and that, and it was not only we tried to solve some of the problems and work with the city, but we were also a social organization. We'd have Christmas parties and picnics and that, which a lot of organizations, I tell, keep your neighborhood as a social organization that can go out and do things because you're already organized. And so right now, of course, it hasn't met for several years, because the problem in a lot of communities, you have community-minded people that start organizations and they do all the work, they get tired of doing it, and nobody steps up. And that. So, but I'm still part of it. I still care about my neighborhood, but now I have to look at the whole community and try to help them and work with the different neighborhood organizations.
Let's see. You were also the executive board vice president of the downtown Decatur Council.
Yeah, we had it. Yeah, it was just it wasn't part of the chamber. It was just a lot of cities have downtown council. I was a vice president, and so recruitment and dealing with issues, parking and things like that. So I was that's when I worked downtown for a private retailer and that. So I was on that board. So again, all the experiences I've had with neighborhoods and organizations such as that, and then even the museum where I ran, was on the council, got elected, and I would go to different cities and visit museums and that, and see what was going on in their community. So it all helps an individual, to be experience all this, so you can use that to shape things in your own community. So you see how other communities messed up, or I always say, why rewrite the book if it's already written? You can add an extra chapter, but you find out where things went wrong for them, and then you don't do the same.
Yeah. Well, you were used to traveling and seeing a lot of different places, so that was maybe right out of your playbook.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about your experience with the Macon County
History Museum.
History Museum.
Yeah. I suggested to the board that we no longer be called our official charter name was the Macon County Historical Society. People don't visit societies; they visit museums. And many other cities started changing. Even they used to have the large Chicago Historical Society. They changed their name several years ago to the Chicago Historical Museum, because you don't visit societies. So
talk a little about that. What was the situation when you came in, and what sort of happened through your tenure?
Well, again, the Historical Society was founded back in the 60s, and then it kind of went down, and then it really started back in the 70s. They ended up buying an old church out on North Fork Road. That was their headquarters. And they always had the yesteryear fair, which was a staple of where you did. And then when the old Enterprise, it was a, God, I can't even think what the name of the old school closed. They ended up buying that.
I see.
And that was a big financial hit, but that became the museum. And again, it's preserving history. But one of the problems is not everybody's interested in the 1860s and 70s and that. You had to progress because our community progressed.
Yeah.
So they went through quite a few different executive directors and that. So I was approached. We know you, and we love a history in business. Would you become our executive director? So I took on the challenge, and I told the board, get behind me and support me, and I'll keep you informed, and we'll move forward. And they said, Pat, you're our last chance if you can't do it. And we didn't have a lot of money at that time, so it was really a one-man person show. I was the bookkeeper, I was the designer, everything. We had a part-time maintenance person, and I had maybe a part-time helper just a few hours a week. So the museum was open Tuesday through Saturday and once a month on a Sunday. And so I started changing exhibits, which kind of got a lot of the people who've been there long. Well, you shouldn't do that. You always have to stay. I said, we have to move forward. And I created the Lincoln Museum section, along with a Lincoln Theater where we showed a film on Abraham Lincoln. Because again, with the opening of the Lincoln Museum in Springfield in April of 2005, and we Decatur, people always forgot that Decatur was Lincoln's first home, where he first gave his first speech, where he practiced law, where he was first mentioned and nominated for the presidency of the United States, right in downtown Decatur. We get no credit.
So that was kind of a nice.
It was a nice
timing.
It was a perfect timing.
Yeah.
And the board got behind me and that. So I expanded the gift shop because you needed income.
Right.
They never really charged a fee to get in. And I said, this is a business. We have to, so their reputation. I got good coverage by local media because nobody really covered the historical society because they were hard to work with. And they never did anything other than they wanted people to come out for the Yesteryear Fair. And so the Yesteryear Fair kind of ended because they were losing money and fewer people came out because times change. Young people and families didn't do things that they used to do 20 years ago.
Right.
So I started the Lincoln Festival, tried that, but it was pretty tough to try to get sponsorship in that. Museums all over the country have kind of suffered. The history museums, the children's museums have been a big growth area, science museums, but nobody really liked history growing up. Most people, when I'd speak to groups, how many did you like history when you were going to school? Nobody would raise their hand. It was one of those type things. So history museums are, one of the last to get sponsorship and support, and it's just one of those things. And so I would study what was happening at other museums. Even the big museums in New York were laying off people. Chicago, some of the biggest museums up there were laying off. I'll always remember one of our meetings over in Springfield. The director of what's called Museums in the Park organization in Chicago had 12 museums under their wing, and he said the good news is people are coming back to our museums in Chicago. The bad news, they're coming on free days.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you can't survive on everybody coming on free days.
Right.
And we charged $2. When I was at the museum, they would never let me raise it. Okay, but people liked what they saw, and they'd leave extra donations. I had a donation box for people, and people would put in a 20 or a 10 plus pay their. So but even then we struggled, and we struggled, but we were blessed to have some longtime members would in their wills they'd leave us some money in that, and we had a couple trusts that brought in some money in that, and we did get a small county tax levy, which wasn't so, but it was still a struggle. I got the council or the board at the museum to sell off the church and that property because it was draining us. And we had quite a few different buildings in the Prairie Village that were falling apart long before I got there. And I said, we're devoting our money down to a church that we have a rummage sale once a year. You can't keep doing this. So we ended up selling that property. But it was a struggle, but I enjoyed doing it. And trying to come up with innovative ideas and get people out to the museum on a regular basis.
Yeah, so that's a great story. Now, we talked already a little bit about your in the context of all your community involvement, and then you got on the council.
Right.
As you look back now, and now you're kind of a veteran of the council. Right?
Yeah.
You've been on the council for a decade or maybe a little more. If you reflect on that, on your time on the council, anything that you'd strike as things that you've learned or things that you've really enjoyed?
Well, there's always, when you're dealing with government, and of course you have to follow Illinois municipal law, and then if you get grants from the federal government, there's only certain things you can do. I think what I tell people that are running, you don't, once you get on the council, you can't do what you think you're going to do because the law doesn't, you can't do it. There's a big difference between government accounting and private business. I remember for 2 years, we had a young banker, and he would look at the books and the accounting. And I said, Mr. Funk, remember, there's government accounting and then there's business accounting. There's two different things. So there's always new challenges coming up, like any community. Decatur's a good community, but we've had challenges over the years. We've lost a lot of factories, like many other Illinois communities, and that's a lot of jobs. Our population, we were never 100,000 people. I keep hearing, we used to see it. No, you didn't. The largest Decatur ever was 94,000 people. Okay, but then when we started losing Firestone and Wagner's and all that, the economists say for every factory job you lose another 8 or 9. The baker, the candlestick maker, and that. So that hurts. So our population went down. There wasn't the opportunity for young people once they got the degree to really stay in Decatur because they didn't have the experience. So as a council member, you work with the others and staff. We set policy. We don't micromanage, and too many people get on, whether it's a school board or the council or other. You're not there under municipal law or education. You can't micromanage. You have one employee, and that's either the school superintendent or the city manager. You don't go to the department heads and that, and a lot of people don't understand that. There's been problems in the past on the city council where council members, you have to know what your role is. We set policy, we approve the budget and change it, whatever needs to be changed. So that's what you're supposed to do. And you also represent, we're at large here in Decatur. We don't have aldermanic type, which there's good points to that, but there's also some big drawbacks. If you have limited resources, everybody wants, just like in Springfield, Chicago wants all this, downstate wants all this, and it's the same in a city like Springfield. It's automatic. Well, I want this for this, and when you only have so much money, it's, everyone's fighting with each other. Yeah. So our form of government, I think, is the best. There's always problems, but it's the best form of government. Our city manager, weak mayor, and council.
What you alluded to there is sometimes there's role confusion on the board, and I sometimes you see that not only on city councils but also in not-for-profit boards where there's confusion. How can board members be educated so that they better understand their proper role?
Well, again, like on a board, not-for-profit board, you're a volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's tough because you have some good board members. Some people go on boards just to be, look, I'm on this board, and never show up other than when they have social events. Okay. Nobody wants to be treasurer or secretary anymore. They're really hard to find. And when I was at the museum, when we first started, we had some people who had been there forever, and they wanted their way and this and that, and we're going to do. Well, the other board members explain, no, that's the executive director's job, and and that's why I always tell executive directors of any keep your board members appraised of what's going on, so there's no surprises. And I've been asked to go on a couple boards, other museums in town, and I kind of backed away when I saw what their bylaws were, and they really didn't have a say. The board members really didn't have a say in what was going on because of the way the bylaws were written. And that's not right. I reported to a board of directors. We had a president and that, executive board and that. So we had monthly meetings, and you kept informed. You let them see the finances. You say, okay, here's a problem. You give reports and things like that. And then that was their time. I'd say, if you have any problems, let me know now. Don't 2 weeks come back. Well, what about? No, tell me now so we can come up with solutions, or I'll back away from what I'm doing on something. And so I've kind of backed away with being on boards not-for-profit boards, when I see what the bylaws are.
Yeah. Well, your approach was to really to facilitate good communication.
Right, and that's the exact keeping. We've had some instances in Decatur where the board, the executive director didn't keep the board appraised. But one of the things also is the board has a responsibility. We had board members forget, and I've told a couple friends I know that are on some boards, there's no insurance. You're responsible if the executive director or whoever takes off with money or major lawsuits. You're on the so. If you don't have insurance, regular insurance on board members, you've got a real problem. And they were kind of surprised. And so I would never go on a board that I'm not covered by insurance. Because, you could have honest board members, but you could have staff that is, taking funds and things like that. So people have to realize that. But also know what's going on and make suggestions. That's what executive board. You got this idea. Well, let's bat it around and things like that. So, and it's the same with council. We make policy, and like I said, we direct the city manager who directs the staff to follow what our policies are. And but you have to study. Your agenda items. You have to know what's going on in that. So I've dealt with a lot of council members, very good, and others that had their own agenda that they wanted done, and this and that, which things that the city can't do in that. So I always say when you look at a picture of me in Vietnam, I had hair and I fought a war, and now I've been on the council for 9 years and I've lost my hair. So what does that tell you?
So there's certainly been some stresses, I'm sure, from being
Oh yeah, it's because people are pretty good. I ever say, "Oh, you must get calls all the time." Rarely do I. I get calls. I get some emails.
Yeah.
I always remember one gentleman, really nice guy. Whenever we'd raise a fee or a tax, by the time I got home, I knew he'd be calling me.
Yeah.
Okay, Pat, let's talk about this. I remember one gentleman that used to always come to the council meetings, and I forget what we did. He walked behind me out, and then some other citizen stopped me in the parking lot at the Civic Center, going over things, and this other gentleman politely stood off the side. So then when the other citizen left, he stepped forward and just rang me up one side and down the other. And I said, "Do you feel better?" "Yeah." I said, "That's what I'm here for." Then I'd go home. So again, you can get some good suggestions from people out there. A lot of times people don't, they read a letter to the editor and think that's what's going on, and most people that write letters to the editor don't know what they're talking about. Or a lot of people, even in this day, they don't read the newspapers, they don't listen to the radio, they don't watch the news, and sometimes on TV news there may be 60 seconds on something and they don't hit the highlights, and people, "Oh, this is going on, and it's not. People, so when you explain to them, this is the reason we're doing this, 99%, "Oh, okay, now I understand." So that's another job of whether you're on the school board, on the city council. When you get out in the community, you can stop a lot of problems by explaining. So I always, whenever I've been asked to speak as a city councilman at different meetings and that, I always kind of lay out, this is what we're doing and planning on, and then I open up for questions. And that's where people get to ask, or I always say, give me questions, comments, or complaints.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times is where I get to say, no, that's not what's going on. This is, oh, okay. So it's very important to get out in the community. You keep down a lot of the problems as much as possible. But you're still going to have people that are never satisfied with anything,
Sure.
and that's fine.
I mean, you must find satisfaction from it as well.
Oh, yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It can be nerve-wracking sometimes. And again, Decatur has some challenge. We got a lot of opportunities. We're a good community, but we have some challenges that I think a lot of times in the past things have been sugar-coated in that. No, people aren't dumb. They know what's going on, whether, Springfield and that to a certain extent. So there are problems, let's tackle them if we can and get input. But people forget, and council members forget, some councilmen, that you were elected to solve the work on it. You can't have public telling you, okay, do this, and that. You take bits and pieces, you come back, okay, that we can do this and that. But you make the decision. You can't go to the public every time to make a decision. You can't, that's why they elect people to Congress. That's why you elect people to the school board, and that's why you elect city council members and mayors. They're there to do the best they can. They will listen, but then they have to take all the information and make a final decision.
You talked earlier about some of the challenges of Illinois become issues for Decatur. What can the community do, if anything?
Well, you can lobby. Communities can come together. Like we're part of the Illinois Municipal League. Mm-hmm. Most cities are, and they do our bidding. On key issues and how it concerns municipalities. Illinois. We've lost a lot of manufacturing. We have high workman's comp costs. We have so many red tape to get through that a lot of companies move out. So if companies aren't interested in Illinois, they're not going to look at Decatur, Bloomington, or Springfield. So you work, and we hire a lobbyist. Most cities have a lobbyist, and we hire a lobbyist to do our, check out what's going on and work with the General Assembly members and the governor's office to mitigate issues. It's just like pensions, okay, police and fire pensions. We don't control the pensions. The state fire association or the police, they go to General Assembly members and say, we need a pension raise. No problem. Okay, you can have a 2% increase. Well, that's an unfunded mandate by the General Assembly. So that comes back on the cities. And that's why a lot of pensions, Illinois and every state is having major problems funding pensions. I think Chicago, with their city staff and school teachers, they're $28 billion shortfall. Okay, so the pensions are unsustainable at the public level, and so that's a major issue. Recently, there was an article in the paper where the Rockford mayor said by 2025, 60% of the revenue of Rockford city gets will go towards pensions. So it's some issues that when you cover pensions, you have to put so much in each, and if you have a shortfall, you take it from their general budget, which is to fix the roads and things like that. So there's less money to do that. So, and just like in a business, 80% of the cost of government is employees. Okay, so that's their biggest expense, and so. You don't want to lay off police or firemen or anybody because you need those to keep, we pay property tax. And also it's another issue. In Illinois, property taxes are extremely high. I think we rank number 2 or 3 in the country behind New Jersey and maybe one other state. And that, locally, people have moved into Decatur because they've been transferred. Oh, we got a good buy in a house, but your property taxes are so much higher than where we lived. And we have an aging population in Decatur, and so that I'm retired, and you hate to get your property tax bill because it keeps going up. We're on, of course, everyone says they're on a fixed income, but that's another thing. And gets local governments and that keep going. Okay, we need more money, and that's down the road. I mean, it's happening now. Last year, we had a deficit of 1.5 million. Doesn't sound like, but for our budget, but many other communities, and they started raising property tax, sales tax. So you don't want to just keep going to the taxpayer, because they get fed up and they're moving out, and that. So
Yeah, but it's difficult.
yeah, it is, and it's a balancing act on budgets and everything when you sit on a local taxing body.
So in your case, I mean, you alluded to a lot of people might say, oh well, this is too expensive or whatever, or I'm ready for less winter or whatever, move to Florida or Texas. Or
well, yeah, I've had five sets of friends that have retired over the last 5 years. One family moved to Ohio, and 4 moved to Florida because it is cheaper to live there. And
But you haven't. You've
Decatur is my home.
Yeah.
My mother. It's the only really family I have.
Yeah.
Got a couple cousins, and she's here and that. And I like Decatur.
Yeah.
I love Illinois, but if you look what the General Assembly done in the governor this last session, we've got more and more and more taxes, and so you start looking and thinking, wow, this is expensive to live in. And I think Illinois and I think 2 other states are the only states in our country that don't tax Social Security and pensions, and so that is one thing that some people have stayed because we need to leave, but others tax, but some of them don't tax Social Security. So people are looking at Tennessee, looking at Florida, and that, and so we got more people moving out of Illinois. I know U-Haul has a company has a real hard time getting trucks back. They're paying people to drive trucks because you got more people leaving Illinois, and that's a lot because retirement and industry is moving out of Illinois because of all the high taxes and red tape and workman's comp. They're going to move to other states where they can get a better deal.
Yeah, people are struggling at a number of levels. At the business level, where businesses leave, then jobs leave, right?
Exactly.
And then there's the other thing where people who may be retired or on fixed incomes are looking at economic pressures, and they're torn because they may have family here, they may have friends here, they may they may really love the community, and so they don't want to leave. Yeah. But there's other pressures, that they're.
Well, I love my community, and that, like I said, we have some challenges we need to address.
Yeah.
And that, young people, and it's just not Decatur. They go away for school and they find jobs. A lot of the kids I graduated from high school, they moved where the jobs are. Or they went away from school in Colorado. Hey, I like Colorado. We're going to stay here, and that's been happening for years and years. Yeah. But we have a lot of job openings in Decatur, but that may not be the jobs that people want. So they're going to go. The young people are going to go where the jobs are.
Let's talk a little bit about the bright side. I mean, as I drive around the city, I've never, and I grew up here and then returned here recently, a few years ago, but I've never seen so many businesses that want to hire people. I mean, practically every.
Yeah, but this is all across the country. We have, of course, with technology moved up, you got a lot of workers that have not improved their job skills. They've worked in a factory, manual, and now the skills needed are not. A lot of employees don't have those. You also have a problem with drugs, being able to pass drug tests. Yeah. Now that Illinois has passed the legalized marijuana, and that would be one of the other big questions and issues that the city council will be tackling. We have till probably December to see whether we are going to opt out of allowing retail. Right now, as it stands, I think there's enough votes to say no. That doesn't mean that somebody can buy marijuana someplace else. But when you talk to employers, they can't get people to pass drug tests. Mm-hmm. They also have a problem. They can teach skills, but the soft skills are extremely lacking in people of all ages. Like you have to show up for work. Just because you work for a few days doesn't mean you get a day off, vacation. I'm tired. I work. You have to do your job, and soft skills are extremely lacking in a lot of people nowadays. People that should be working, and that. But also, when you have a welfare state like Illinois, and you can live better and not have to work, and you don't have to. You get, and this is what I've heard from employers. We could get some people, but when you have such a, we'll give you this, this, and this, and why work when you can get all this? So that's something. You look back at the Great Depression. My mother and probably your parents and that and grandparents. That people would not just take money. We want to work in that, and it came to point with WPA in that if you wanted money for your family, you had to work. But that's across this country that ethic has gone down, and it's kind of sad, and so that creates a generational problem.
Yeah. Well, the community's been a beneficiary of the generosity of different foundations.
Howard Buff has been very good. Yes,
we've been the beneficiary of some, the campus downtown, and now the Devon.
Yeah, right. Again, we're doing
which are how should I put it? These are investments that are brick and mortar investments.
Well,
but the thing that you brought up is really what I might call human capital is what is missing. It's maybe the soft skills are not there that employers need, and if those skills aren't there, then how are we going to?
Well, again, that comes, and we've got several good, Richland Community College, Millikan University, Workplace, trying to teach skills that are needed. I know ADM and Tate & Lyle and other industries, Caterpillar, work with Richland. These are the skills we need, and that's one good thing about a community college. They can move faster than a 4-year liberal college. Okay, they can change their curriculum, what is needed. And so, again, I'll praise Richland Community College because there is a gym in our community, and I'm glad we have it.
Yes.
But, and I've also talked where they show up, and a lot of the students get paid to go, but they don't show up, and they don't. It's just they get the money, and so you got to have a desire by our young people that work, and we've got a lot of great young people that want to move ahead in that, and you hope they stay in our community. But if they get the skills and they don't have the jobs here, they're going to move someplace else. I know one of the challenges I deal with council members. Well, if we have more bike trails, more young people will move, young professional. No. Well, I guess more bike trails are fine, but that's not where they're going to move to Decatur. They're going to move here because there's a job opening.
Right.
And that. So, again, I go back to, have to know what's happening in the real world and not in your imagining in your mind. So, but again, we have some good organizations that are working to fill the skill needs that our local industry, because if they can't find it, they're going to move and go someplace else. Just like the city's main job is to maintain the basic infrastructures, the streets, sewers. In Decatur's case, water. We just spent $90 million on ensuring that we had a water supply. We were within a week or two of ADM closing down several years ago. We missed out on some other companies in the past because we couldn't supply them the water. So, water rates had to go up. Now, I blame past councils for not gradually raising water rates. I'll always remember Pat Legler, who was on the council for many years. Every year, we're not covering the cost of just producing clean water. And so governments are really slow. Oh, we better not raise this, we won't get elected. Well, then all of a sudden you need the money, and instead of small increments, you've got one big, and then everybody gets upset. And that. So now we get federal grants, the city, that we ask for not-for-profits or organizations that are especially work-skilled, and we will hand those out to them to further their work in that. So we can do that as a city. We're not in charge of training, but we can help fund if we get grants. Ours is, again, basic. I always tell council members, yes, we need to keep an eye on the big picture, but that everyday picture that we all live, garbage, make sure potholes are filled, little things like that affect everybody's life. That's what we have to do. Think for the future, plan, but also take care of the present.
Yes. Well, Pat, it's been a pleasure this evening to talk with you, and we really appreciate your leadership and your impact on the community.
I appreciate it, and that, so no problem. Did you guys eat?